This is going to be a fantastic evening. But before we begin, of course, I want to recognise that we're here on beautiful Gadigal country, unceded land, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And I pay my respects and deep gratitude to elders past, present and emerging for their ongoing custodianship of country. And I also want to acknowledge just a few of our fantastic festival speakers: Jess Herder, Jonathan Jones, Darryl Wells, Peter Cooley, Coolin Gordon, all of them working across planning, housing, horticulture, art and architecture, showing the importance of designing with country and seeing each planning and development process as an opportunity for regenerating country, and in so doing supporting community and culture. I'm Nicole Gurran. I'm Professor of Urban and Regional Planning here at the University of Sydney. I know many of you. It's welcome back, those of you who are coming back to your alma mater. I also direct the Henry Halloran Urban and Regional Research Initiative, which runs this annual Festival of Urbanism, which is the opportunity that we take every year to raise topical questions, topical issues facing urban and regional communities, and bringing together the different bodies of knowledge across our university and other universities in conversation with industry, with policymakers, with leading practitioners, community advocates, and the wider public. Tonight we're going to do all of that, but with a particular focus on emerging generations and future generations, which is absolutely thrilling. So all I get to do now is introduce the chair of tonight's proceedings, Natalie Laurie, a proactive emerging planner, currently serving as co-convener of the New South Wales Planning Institute of Australia Emerging Planners Committee 2025. Natalie holds a Bachelor's and a Master's of Urban Management and Planning from Western Sydney University. And I just want to give a shout out to Western Sydney University. We were there today for our Parramatta event. The university now is the linchpin of what's happening around Parramatta Square, and we've had some fantastic speakers from Western Sydney University as well, including Professor Louise Crabtree-Hayes yesterday. Natalie recently transitioned from development assessment at Ku-ring-gai Council. You were really in the trenches, Natalie. Amazing. To a planning officer with the Department of Education. Some fantastic planners there, also from the University of Sydney, I have to say. Natalie brings over 8 years of local government experience across sport and recreation, strategic planning and statutory planning. She's passionate about fostering connections, supporting professional growth, and she's committed to broadening her own expertise across all areas of planning while actively sharing her knowledge with the planning community. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Nicole. It's always weird hearing about yourself. So I'm Natalie Laurie, and I'm obviously, it's going to be a mouthful. It's the Planning Institute of Australia's New South Wales Emerging Planner Committee co-convener. I'm so used to saying that now. So the Planning Institute of Australia is a national body that advocates and represents planners across the nation. The Emerging Planner Committee specifically support early career planners, so within the first 5 years of graduation or if you're a student. We partner in a lot of events similar to tonight, partner with organisations to help encourage emerging planners to join the industry and help with that transition. Just a big thank you to Henry Halloran Urban Regional Research Institute for hosting us tonight and allowing us to collaborate on this event. So thank you very much. So on to tonight's theme. Regenerative urbanism is about making cities better for the people and the planet. It's about taking a big picture approach to create a real and lasting change to the way that we live, work and play. With challenges occurring simultaneously like climate change, inequalities and biodiversity loss, we need to rethink how we manage food, water, energy, transport, land and housing. Unlike traditional urban regeneration, which often feels like a top-down approach, regenerative urbanism focuses on healing. restoring and renewing both ecosystems and the community. From First Nations landscapes and design practices to urban farming, green infrastructure, circular economies, and creative projects, this year's Festival of Regenerative Urbanism explores exciting new ways to make the city healthier, fairer, and more vibrant. Our fantastic panellists will share their experiences, knowledge, and research to help explore this topic further. But just before we dive in, a quick overview. So we'll begin with our photo competition, followed by our panel discussion. Then we'll open to a Q&A session featuring questions that have already been submitted by you, the audience. Then we will announce our winners of the competition, the photo competition. And just after, we'll have a reception just outside featuring some networking and light refreshments. Just quickly, can you please turn your phones on silent? That will be amazing. So I'd like to introduce to the stage our exhibition curator, Vera Chi. So she is a design and urban technology lecturer in the School of Architectural Design and Planning at University of Sydney. She has a PhD in urban and regional planning with expertise in various technologies such as smart furniture and smart greenhouse technologies. Vera, can I please welcome you to the stage?
Thank you, Latanya. I'm delighted to deliver a curatorial statement for the photo competition that Festival of Urbanism has organized and supported with our university students. So you can see the photo being looping here on the side screen. Photography is more than documentation. It helps us notice what is overlooked and frame possibilities in new ways. To photograph regeneration, the theme of this year's festival, is in many ways to participate in it. This year's festival invite us to think of regeneration not just as reducing harms to our built or natural environment, but as restoring, renewing, and creating conditions of care so that both our ecosystems and communities can flourish. At a time of climate instability, social inequities, and biodiversity loss, regeneration is both urgent and hopeful. The photo competition has brought together a fantastic range of submissions from undergraduates, postgraduates, PhD students across planning, urban design, architecture, architectural science, geography, interaction design, electronic arts, and many other disciplines. We see regeneration captured in waterways, compost heaps, cultural precincts, reused farm buildings, green rooftops, street gutters, and bamboo installations. Some photos are poetic, some photos are playful, and some focus on everyday acts of care, from community gardens to street cleaners, dog walkers, and reuse economics. The judging panel, myself, and also my colleague, Dr. Ian Woodcock, sitting on the front row, and our partners from the Planning Institute of Australia, New South Wales, Noran Daly and Sebastian Aguilar, assessed each entry for creativity, storytelling, and its connection to this year's themes. We'll be announcing the awards later this evening, but what has stood out to us was the spirit of curiosity and care. In small details and fleeting moments, this work reveals possibilities for urban life that might otherwise pass us by. So on behalf of the judging panel, I congratulate all participants and commend their work to you. You can view the full curatorial essay and curated image online, which is live on the Festival of Urbanism website. And for now, I invite you to carry forward the spirit of these works and as we move on to the panel discussion. Thank you.
So now I'll just invite our speakers up one by one. So our first speaker is Colin Finn. He's an urban futurist based in Sydney, focused on the intersection of design, climate change, and the creation of great places for people. Founder of Blue Green Australia, he's led projects that combine ecological restoration, community engagement, and urban design to build climate resilience. With a PhD in urban ecology underway at University of Sydney, Colin draws on Indigenous knowledge and modern data to identify natural-based solutions like wetland restorations for urban coastal lands. His works blend science, policy and storytelling to deliver regenerative outcomes that benefit place, people and the planet. Our next speaker, Aaron Peterson. He is the National and New South Wales Young Planner of the Year 2025. Yes, definitely a big achievement there. So Aaron is an acting senior infrastructure planner at the New South Wales Department of Planning, Housing and Infrastructure. His role revolves around planning and funding for state infrastructure requirements across New South Wales. He is also a casual academic at the University of New South Wales, teaching strategic and infrastructure planning. Aaron is a strong advocate for the next generation of planners, continuously encouraging them to strive for positive outcomes and shape a better urban future. Our next speaker, Akshi Sabu, is an urban designer at Design Inc., with a background in both architecture and urban design. His work spans across transport infrastructure, public space, and master plans, grounded in research and driven by a strong commitment to place identity and community outcomes. Alongside practice, he is a casual academic at the University of Sydney and regularly contributes to journals and publications, sharing ideas on urban design, theory and practice. His current focus is on connecting with country and co-design approaches, embedding cultural knowledge and collaboration to achieve more inclusive and sustainable outcomes. Our last speaker is Lucy Band. She is an experienced planner and sustainability professional who has contributed to shaping cities across across Australia and the UK. In 2024, she was the Martin Payne Practitioner in Residence with the Henry Halloran Urban and Regional Research Institute, where her research focused on embedding wellbeing outcomes in planning. A University of Sydney alumni with a graduate diploma in urban and regional planning, now working as an independent consultant with a focus on enhancing social outcomes in cities and communities. Thank you. Okay, do I have a mic? This is weird not being behind a lectern. Okay, yeah, I'm mic'd up. So, well, Colin, you're my first question. So Colin, you're an urban futurist. What does that role entail?
That's something someone called me at a panel once, and it kind of stuck. Because I'm not a planner, I'm not an architect, I think I'm barely an academic, I'm very much an activist. But I spend a lot of time talking about possible futures, and good futures and terrible futures. And I'm going to start this off on a bit of a down note. There will be a day that the young planners here will have to live through where the coral sea has warmed up. The coral sea has warmed by 2 to 4 degrees. The East Coast lows that used to bump down the coast are now coming at us increasingly from the northeast. There'll be a day in the next X years where X is probably less than 20 but more than 10, that a storm will come straight from the east, and it's going to be pushing 1 to 5 meters of storm surge ahead of it. And it's going to push in through the heads of Sydney Harbour, raising up the water in Sydney Harbour like a bathtub from 1 to 5 meters, at which point it's going to start raining. And it's going to rain for 5 days. We're going to have what happened to Taree. We're going to have what happened to the northern rivers. At which point, some of the project sites I've been diving into, like Rushcutters Bay, the entirety of the parkland will go underwater. 300 homes will go underwater. But more importantly, New South Head Road will go underwater, which cuts off most of the eastern suburbs. and the sewage pumping stations will go underwater, at which point Sydney Water is going to be forced to say, do we turn off the sewage for the entire eastern city, or do we fill the harbour with millions of gigalitres of sewage? And that's just Rushcutters Bay. At the same time, we're losing all of Double Bay, all of Canada Bay, all of Rose Bay. This day, if we do nothing, is going to happen. The young planners in the room are going to live through this day. The science is now pretty much settled science. And the futures I look at, what if we pick different futures? What if we pick the future that Singapore's picked, or Copenhagen's picked, or New York has picked, where instead we have acted before the crisis, where we've lifted up the parkland in Rushcutters Bay, we've created great natural wetlands, we've put in a barrier of oysters and some floating wetlands, we've made children's adventure nature parks and landscape berms you can sit and watch the fireworks. This is a future we can choose to live in if we act before the crisis. And we have completely run out of time. That's what I do as a futurist.
Very detailed, thank you very much. Moving on to Aaron. So Aaron, you wear many hats, as I just went through. So how do you describe your role's impact in shaping cities that are more people-centric?
Thankfully, my advocacy isn't as dire as Colin's work is, but or hopeful. I do try to deliver hope, and I do wear multiple hats. So working at UNSW as an academic, working in the department as an infrastructure planner, and also just being a citizen of Sydney. I try to balance the three priorities and just be an advocate. Growing up in Western Sydney, still living in Western Sydney, I work in Western Sydney, but most of my life tends to gravitate east, is that Western Sydney is a whole different world to the Eastern City, and that Western Sydney doesn't fully understand what good planning is or what good outcomes are. A lot of the discussions I have with my family, with my friends, the people I interact with the most, when I tell them, we need less roads, we need more cycle paths, we need more trees, we need more green, blue infrastructure, they just go, this is all just fancy stuff from the city or from Europe. It's like, well, no. Like, if you don't understand, if we don't do this, we're going to have this dire future hit us. As we've seen earlier this week with the federal government's climate assessment risk report, Western Sydney is the part of Australia that's going to be affected most. And what I'm trying to do as an advocate through academia, but also my work at the state government, is to just be that voice for we can do things better. Every additional road we fund, do we really need to spend that money on that road? Can we spend that $100 million on urban greening? Can we spend $100 million on public transport? Can we spend it on something else that delivers better value? One thing I'm a big advocate for is fine-grained small infrastructure. So my work at state government works on the big flashy projects. We all love a flashy new metro, a flashy new school, flashy new hospital, but it's actually the fine-grained infrastructure that's more critical and important, and that's what we all realise or don't we realise it isn't there when we get to it. And that's your bus stops, it's your footpaths, it's the trees. It's those small bits of infrastructure that's probably closest to your home and closest to your suburbia and in your workplace, that you notice it when it's not there because you're complaining, I can't walk over there, there's no trees here, it's hot. But when it's there, you don't really notice it, you take it for granted. And it's that really fine-grained infrastructure that I'm trying to advocate for, that we need to implement into Western Sydney, because we need to show residents of Western Sydney that these small changes are going to change your life. We have a climate emergency chasing us. We need to plan better for that. And being an infrastructure planning officer, everyone thinks I plan for roads and I plan for motorways in high schools and metros. I do, but it's more that fine-grained infrastructure that's actually going to have a bigger impact for people's lives, but also the environment that I really push for.
So the missing middle of infrastructure is what I'm hearing.
The missing middle of infrastructure.
Instead of the missing middle of housing. So Akshay, your work focuses on connecting with country and co-designing processes. How do these approaches tie into the broader idea of regenerative urbanism? I'm actually very keen to hear about this. Planning is evolving in this space, I'm going to say.
That's actually a really interesting question. So I've been working with Aboriginal communities for last few years. So it's in my opinion, when we talk about regenerative urbanism, it's not like a brand new concept. If you see Aboriginal communities, they have been doing this for thousands of years. So not just in Australia, if you see the indigenous communities around the world, they have been, this regenerative approach, it has been part of their culture, and they have been living with nature and regenerating. That's their part of their culture. So speaking specifically to Australia, it's like, for example, the practice of cool burning or cultural burning. So for those who don't know, it's basically it's a land management practice, traditional land management practice. So where we set fire on certain areas in a very controlled and in a low intensity manner. So this basically helps with the regeneration of the new plants and also improves the biodiversity. So that's basically regenerative urbanism in action. So it's not very different than these modern concepts. So I believe there's a large untapped knowledge system from the traditional culture. So in my opinion, regenerative urbanism, it's not just about reviving the traditional landscape or greening the area. It's also about regenerating these traditional values, practices, and this knowledge system. Yeah.
I think it's very important if we need to focus on the planet and improving the planet, so definitely
yes.
agree. Lucy, your research has focused on embedding wellbeing outcomes in planning. Can you please briefly explain your work and provide some of your research outcomes and also some recommendations? Because this is wellbeing in planning. I feel like there's a lot. It's very broad here.
It is very broad. Yes, so my research looked specifically at the wellbeing outcomes from the federal government's wellbeing framework, which is really around a more healthy, sustainable, safe, cohesive and prosperous. I think I've got all 5 in there. And how we can embed those outcomes within the planning system in New South Wales. And there's lots that I could touch on, but I think what's really relevant to tonight's discussion is that when I spoke to planners, there was, really strong alignment between these outcomes and the aspirations of planners. I think we all want to achieve these things. There's really strong alignment between planning policy. If you pick up any local strategic planning statement, you'll see those words in there. And there's also a really strong body of evidence linking the built environment to wellbeing outcomes, and not just health, those really broad wellbeing outcomes. So, but I think despite all those really positive things, what I saw were some pretty significant barriers to achieving these things in planning. And there were, I guess, the 3 that really kind of sum it up for me was around, one, not like when I asked planners, are we achieving these things? Are we achieving healthy cities? Are we achieving sustainable places? People kind of said, I don't really know. I don't really have the evidence for that. And we don't really have a system for looking at the outcomes of planning. And that's really challenging, and it challenges planning systems around the world, but we should want to have the evidence for the work that we're doing. So that was one thing. I think another aspect was that people express that planning does not give equal consideration to social, environmental and economic outcomes. We have an over-reliance on economic growth and material consumption to achieve all these other policy goals that we want. And again, it's challenging, but we need new tools and new ways of kind of imagining planning to achieve these things. And lastly, planners have a really tough job. Like, it's very complex to balance those outcomes in decision making. I'm sure as assessing officers, that's a really hard thing to do. But people also told me we don't have the right tools to do that. So I raise those barriers, I guess, not to be, Debbie Downer on what we can achieve, but hopefully to give us a bit of a cheat sheet for what we need to address to achieve, whether it's wellbeing or regenerative urbanism. And there are great things happening here in Australia and also overseas, which my research looked at as well.
Yeah. That's very interesting, and I really resonate with that as an assessment planner. Yeah. Sometimes once you just give the approval, then you never hear what happens after the approval, and you don't do like a survey or get opinions on what was developed and how the outcome was for the community. So yeah, definitely resonate with that a lot. So many thoughts going through my mind about it. I'm like, oh my God, I can't ask you every question. So Colin, back to you. So your PhD, so urban ecology at the University of Sydney, and so you bring a strong environmental lens. Can you briefly, or you've kind of touched on the area of study, but what outcomes are you hoping to achieve, particularly around regenerative urbanism?
Well, the PhD is quite odd. It's a bit of a murder mystery. So I set out not knowing what question I was going to answer. I interviewed 50 people through government, from sitting members in parliament all the way through council officers, and heard things like 92% of them said that nature is one of their single most important priorities, and only 8% of them said that they have any power to influence it. I then did a global case study review of amazing projects around the world, projects like Bishan in Singapore that converted a canal to a beautiful park where the biggest risk they have now is the otters that have returned bite tourists. These are high quality problems that if urban otters are your problem. And deep diving into projects like Sydney Park here in Sydney, which cost us $600 million, which is a lot of money, but has made in cash value for state of New South Wales about $7 billion. Digging into like, well, why do these projects exist? And somehow we say we don't have money. And then spent far too long on our literature review and distilled about 1,000 points of evidence, sort of looking at a crime scene with knives stuck in sofas and bodies hidden under couches, into a cluster of 5 quite defensible barriers. Really simple emotive statements that I think are way down the iceberg of why we don't do this. With a handy acronym WEEP of what's in it for me. So much of the New South Wales planning system is built around what's in it for me. Community engagement's built around what's in it for me. Who pays for nature? That is an incredibly unanswered question here. The City of Sydney municipal levies paid for Sydney Park and didn't get any of that $6 to $10 billion of cash value. It's everybody's problem and it's nobody's. I was at a Great Committee for Sydney event today, and lots of earnest people, and it's everybody's problem, so it's nobody's problem. And a really deep one of it's easier to say no. It's always easier to say no. There's no social safety in the public service. That's how you get things like 92% of council staff I talk to saying, we love this idea, but I can't say yes to this. I can't be seen to be saying yes to this. What if it's in The Guardian next week? And then a really deep structural one that our whole planning system is built around prosecution. If you think about if you do a master plan or you do a mega DA, you're essentially building a giant legal case. The Barangaroo Mod 10 alone is about 400 pages long because you're going to get every single piece of attack. You have to assume every attack vector. And that's not how nature works. Nature works in partnership. And cities like Singapore work in partnership, or Copenhagen work in partnership, where you can set out saying, we want to protect Rushcutters Bay. We don't exactly know how. That's what my research is being. And if I keep writing, I'll finish the PhD by Christmas.
I'm glad you've at least narrowed down to a question, because sometimes there's so much research, you're like, okay, where do I start now? So, but no, thank you very much for sharing. Aaron, noting your experience in infrastructure, funding and planning, what do you see as being the future of regenerative urbanism in that space?
Colin mentioned prosecution. I should mention that all views I'm about to say are my own and not my employer's. But you do raise a good point. Being involved in the infrastructure space, I have a lot of power. To Colin's point, I'm the one deciding where we spend our money. Not me, but my superiors. But I build the case for it. And we are sometimes limited in what we can advocate for. We have legislation that says what we have to consider. The main piece of legislation I work with, unfortunately, doesn't consider the environment. It considers schools, hospitals, roads, metros, and sometimes regional open space. Underground cables is a big one, yeah. Not nature, but the basics. But open space isn't always considered basic, unfortunately. So I want to try change that narrative and that shift in my role currently. It's quite hard to do, but through my academic work, I'm trying to encourage, We've made several mistakes in Sydney over the last few centuries, 2 centuries, with some of the roads we've built. We've built the Western Distributor, we've built the Cahill Expressway, we've built these sprawling motorways that stretch all the way out to the Western Parkland City. We have a new motorway opening late this year, early next year. And don't get me wrong, they serve a purpose. They have had many benefits as well as disbenefits. But how can we rectify that for the future? And that's where we need to start considering, okay, what's next for those roads and those assets? If we want to talk with treasury and finance terms, it's an asset. What can we do with this asset? We're going to renew it, we're going to expand it, what are we going to do? And I think something that as a city we need to come to realize is that, do we actually need that asset? If you go look at places in the Netherlands, you go look at places in Korea, they've gotten rid of motorways completely. And even somewhere in places in the US have gotten motorways completely. Or they've turned it into a high line or an open space, or they've turned it into something that can be used by a lot more people. And I think that's where we need to start shifting our mindset is regeneration for the future doesn't have to be brand new infrastructure. It doesn't have to be this big, bold new plan. It can just be ripping up some tarmac and putting some dirt and trees down. And the impact of that will actually be much larger and beneficial for more people. Something that I try to keep in the back of my mind for a lot of the work I do, given I work a lot with roads, is that in New South Wales, 40% of the population do not have a driver's license. That's 40% of the entire population, yet most of our money goes towards the 60% who have the driver's license and who drive. And of that 60%, I can guarantee a further 10-15% don't drive because they don't have a car, they're elderly, etc. So why is most of our thought and planning and funding and effort going into 45-50% of the population? There's an entire 50% that we aren't planning for. And I think that's most demonstrated by, I took the bus here from Central to, up Broadway. For every car on Broadway, there's about 15 people on the footpath crammed in like sardines waiting for the signal. Is that really the right allocation of space? And I think that's a great example where regenerative urbanism can shift that. We don't need to get rid of the road completely. The road serves a purpose. People always need to drive. The elderly, parents with lots of kids, disabled, tradies, they need their youth. So don't get rid of the road. Just reallocate the user space. Chuck a light rail down the middle. Take one lane away to put bicycle paths. It won't ruin people's lives. There'll be short-term pain, but there'll be long-term gain. And I think that's where the infrastructure world needs to start shifting, is how can we do these small incremental changes to build and create a better case for our cities?
Agree. There's going to be a time where not many people use cars. And I'm seeing that now. Like my younger cousin, she's in school and does not want to get a driver's license because mum drives her everywhere. So, and it's just all her friends. So it is going to phase out sooner or later. So actually, your work bridges urban design, architecture and planning. So how do you, or can you share some of those principles that influence your work, specifically around regenerative urbanism?
Yeah, sure. So basically at Design Inc., we always start the project with exploring the historic evolution of the place. So it's like not just the colonial history. When I talk about history, it's like every place has like millions of years of history and thousands of years of human occupation. So when we consider that timeline, all those disruptions to this natural system, it all happened in the last century or so. So what we try to do in most of our projects, regardless of the scale, it's like try to repair some of the damage we have done in like different scales. So like Aaron mentioned, the scale is very important. Even if it's like a small architecture or even like a pocket park project, it's basically part of the whole ecological network. So whatever we do, even if it's like a smaller intervention, like connecting a green network through the site, or even like filtering the water before it flows to the creek, it all makes like a big impact because it all creates a ripple effect in the wider network. So I think the key here is to consider it as a whole and think in different scales. So that's the usual methodology we follow. So it's pretty much inspired from the country perspective of system thinking.
Holistic approach.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Lucy, your experience is across Australia but also the UK. Are you able to explain a little bit about some of the social outcomes and the regenerative urbanism that you've seen internationally?
Yes, so with the research that I mentioned previously, I did a case study and I looked at Wales in detail and the Welsh planning system. I'm getting a nod. Yeah, it's amazing. And so in 2015, they introduced the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which is really like their equivalent of our wellbeing framework. But now that it's been in place for 10 years, there's a great body of evidence and impact to go and look at and see, well, how are they doing things differently since they brought in the Act? And I think, there's definitely social and political differences between Australia and Wales, but there's great lessons. And one of the things that they did when the Act came into place is that it actually led to a complete rewrite of their planning policy to be orientated around wellbeing. And they brought in a statutory purpose that the purpose of planning is to achieve these wellbeing outcomes. And I think those things are great, but they have also been, I guess, can be criticised for being, too high level and aspirational. And so I think they then did a really good job of taking those pieces of policy and creating them into practical tools that planners can use, which, for example, they introduced a hierarchy, a sustainable transport hierarchy, a sustainable energy and waste hierarchy that has to be considered in any, plan making or development assessment. So a really practical way for them to take these really big wellbeing goals and saying, how can we actually use these in decision making for planners? And they also introduced their ways of working. So not just goals, but how do we operationalize these goals to really have impact? And they said, it's not just about achieving health, it's, demonstrate how are you collaborating to achieve health as a public body? How are you thinking long term? How are you thinking about preventative action, preventative spend? So some really powerful ways that they brought into law. And I just, there's a lot that we can learn from the Welsh example. And even very small things, like one of the outcomes they're seeking to achieve is an increase in Welsh speakers. And so the Welsh language is now a material consideration in planning decisions. And I would love to see that here too with First Nations languages. So lots that we can learn internationally.
Yeah. Very interesting how they weaved in the traditional language there too. Yeah. And it's just insane, and I think that they've done an overhaul of their planning system, which is very bold, and then they've still continued with implementation. Very interesting. So firstly, thank you. We are going to go to a Q&A of questions I have prepared earlier that I've left on the lectern, so let me just quickly grab them. Then we'll do some Q&A. And we can also open up to the audience. So if you... Oh, the questions were from the audience, yes. But if you also have any other questions, let us know and we can try and squeeze you in. Okay. Oh, Colin, I'm going to do this one for yourself. What's your current concern in urbanism in the Sydney area?
That we wait until after the disaster to act. It's just, I've had very senior members of state and federal government say, we love this plan, we'd endorse this plan after the disaster. And the truth is, we know what happens after the disaster. The Upper Thames flooded, there's a 2-meter storm wall. The Louisiana flooded, there's a 3-meter storm wall. We will build seawalls. Sydney Hart, and talk to community a lot and say, well, where do you want we know that we need a 2-meter barrier between Rushcutters and Iron Cove and Canada Bay, all of these things, and the sea. Where are we going to put the 2-meter wall? Or could you let us do it with plants and trees and mangroves? That's my concern.
Thank you. I'm going to go to our young planners, well, emerging planners now. So if regeneration is for next generation, how would you, as a young planner, reimagine our urban communities so they are more inclusive and alive for the decades to come? So Aaron or Akshi? This is why we direct questions.
So basically, I believe like this regenerative urbanism. It's a paradigm shift. So we have been like focusing on sustainable systems, and now it's like a more proactive paradigm compared to that. So I think young generation has a lot of new vision to contribute to that. And I also think it's like for example when we think about regenerative systems, so these if most of the regenerative system, if you see like the maintenance, if it might look great during the opening of a park or something like that. But when we go forward, the systems need to be more sustained in that way, and it needs to be minimum maintenance. So that's something we often fails in the recent systems. So I believe going forward, we need to focus on the systems that's more healing itself and sustained by itself. Yeah.
I think we need to more focus on the mindset for young and emerging professionals, people, citizens, people that aren't born yet, the intergenerational equity. That it's a mindset change that we need to slowly implement. Our generation, the up and coming young people's generation, we've probably gone through a lot more change than maybe some other generations have. I'm sure older generations will argue that, but the pace of change is maybe a lot quicker. The scale of change maybe not, arguably, but the pace of change is much quicker. So we need to be able to use that to our advantage and go, okay, everything's changing really, really quickly. What change do we want to see, and when do we want to see it? I think that's where young people need to be empowered to make decisions, especially in planning. We're not always empowered in planning, both at state government but also private. We're not always empowered to make the right call because we're worried about retribution or the consequences. Sometimes we just have to back ourselves and see what happens. I like to use the term, there's no such thing as a planning emergency. The world won't fall apart as much as developers love to say, or the community will say, you're going to ruin my life. Sometimes we just need to back ourselves and see what happens. Because if we don't, we know what's going to happen. And I feel like there's a lot in between what we can try to do and that final outcome.
I also think that people forget that planners are trying to deal with all the wicked problems that are happening in the world at the moment. So it's not just let's focus on housing or let's focus on infrastructure. There's so many problems that are happening at once. So then everyone's just putting urgency on that, but really we need to work with all those problems and figure out what the best outcome is and how do we overcome that solution without impacting, or that problem without impacting the other one. So.
Spot on. And if I can add just quickly, planning, the profession, planners are not the problem. We are part of the solution. A lot of media narrative lately is that planners are the problem, bureaucratic red tape, get rid of them. That doesn't work. Okay, there's a reason why urban planning exists. I'm not saying we're perfect, but we are part of the solution. So we need to work with everyone to be part of the solution. Not one person's the problem and not one person's the solution. We're all part of it. So we just need to work together to achieve what we want to achieve.
Yeah, I just want to add one tiny thing to that. One of the things that shone out in my research is planners don't feel socially safe. They don't feel legally safe, and they don't feel that they can talk out. They don't feel they can risk. Like imagine you're a young planner and you talk out about something you deeply believe about and you lose the client, and that's $500,000 of billables. Or if you're at the department and you represent the department in a public forum and you have the chat. Right, we have to create social and legal safety for the people who can make change.
I can see Lucy down the end shaking. Yeah, definitely agreeing with that. Did you have anything else to add? Because it seemed like your research found those barriers too.
Yeah, I just think it's a really challenging time for planners. I don't think we can do anything right now. Like, we're enemies of enterprise on one hand, but also we're pro-development on the other hand, and I just think it's a really tricky situation right now.
Yeah. Now I'm going to open up the last question to everyone. What is something that you want the audience or future planners to take away from the session today or the discussion today? I'll give you a quick time to think about it.
Well, I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah.
The origin of urban planning is radical. You're utopians. You're the people who can make change. That is your literal job. You're meant to think of the future and make the change that could happen. Your job is not to maximize client billables. It's not to keep your minister from being on the front page of The Guardian. Your job is to represent the public good. That's what I want to see changed.
Think small. I think we get told to think big a lot. Think small. Fight for that, pocket park down the road. Fight for a bus stop. Put in a submission on this random weird council DA for they want to extend the footpath, or that they're putting a funding proposition for a playground. It's the small things that matter. I think we're too focused on this big stuff. We're always focused on the big numbers, the big infrastructure projects, the big policies and strategies that put ministers on the front page for the right reason. Let's just think small and find the grail and work our way up. If we can get place-based infrastructure right, then we can start going on city and regional scale. So just think small.
I believe the young generation, they need to bring in new thoughts, at the same time learn from the past. And also like Aaron mentioned, there are high potential in this micro scale projects. So it's like everything is connected to everything and nothing is connected to nothing. So it's all about understanding the whole narrative and the intricate network of systems.
I would echo the being courageous. But also I think commitment. There are so many good ideas out there, and there are so many frameworks, and there are so many guidelines, and all these ideas are great, but we have to commit to something and really go for it. And I think that's the only way we compete with something like the ubiquity of GDP and economic growth. Let's just all agree which one we're going for and go for it. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your knowledge and your research as well. It's always good to hear what other people are working on. So thank you very much, panellists. Everyone, give them a hand. So we're just going to move on to our photo competition. So guys, you're more than welcome to jump off the stage. I'm going to invite Vera and Ian to the stage to hand out the awards. Okay. Okay. So firstly, I think I'm on. That's right, I can speak loudly. It's all right, I'm back on. I always speak loud. But firstly, a big thank you to all the students who submitted into the competition. They were very high quality and some creative photos, as you guys can see. The entries were beautifully reflected of this year's theme, showcasing emerging planners and how they see the future as bold, green, and respectful of both old and new. So considering this, we have 3 different categories, and there's 4 winners, which is really good. So the first category is Creative Awards, Best Storyteller. We also have Highly Commended and Best Overall. So without further ado, our first award winner for the Creative Award, Best Storyteller. This entry demonstrated the best narrative interpretation of the theme. So a thought-through image that elevated an everyday gutter into a narrative on care and place, capturing tension and the opportunities in urbanism. The entry winner is number 16, Jachi Chang. Congratulations. So the next category is Highly Commended, and we have 2 award winners here. So our first award winner entry featured a striking use of contrast and lighting from a human perspective, with muted colours highlighting the green in everyday urban space. The second winner reflected a strong composition with deep blacks, whites and textures. The blurred grass in the foreground makes the image tangible and slightly evoking time and place. So the first winner of this category is Claudia Duran. Yeah. And our second winner is Frank Yang, entry 13. Didn't want to be like head in the back of the photo. And finally, our best overall award goes to the entry with a simple yet powerful photo that uses light and shadow to capture rural adaptation, renewal, and the balance between old and new. So the winner and receiving a $500 gift voucher is Charles Barbu. Thank you. So to close off our event, I just wanted to give a big thank you to Henry Halloran Urban and Regional Research Institute for a fantastic week of events. It's open till the 2nd of October, your event? A couple more events left, yeah. Also a big thank you to the merging planners who helped facilitate this event today. Our judges and our panellists for your time and sharing your research and experience with us. And thank you, all of you, for joining us today. And just a reminder, afterwards, we have a reception just outside for some networking and some light refreshments. So thank you. Can we please give a round of applause to Henry Halloran and our